Raw, Park, Norhair, and Seek. What are they? They're all prefixes and suffixes to the word Hyde. But the focus of today's podcast isn't overrated southern lakes, children's games, missing persons, or indeed dried and stretched animal skin. The prefix we're interested in is that of the now departed Brandon. He's not dead, by the way. But before we briefly review the Nats series and then delve into the most significant development with the Orioles since the temporary upgrade of a sound system at Camden Yards, I'd like to introduce your regular O's across the pond starting rotation and a very special guest reliever. Hiding in plain sight in Kent. Hi, Andy.
Good evening.
Saving our hides in Scotland. Hi, Grant.
Hi, everyone.
Our very own Scouse answer to Dr. Jekyll. Hi, Thomas.
I'll do.
And coming from Sheffield, ready or not, is the British Oriole himself. Welcome, Matt.
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, first, before we kick things off, we'd appreciate it if you could give the listeners a rundown on your O's story, really, how you became a fan and any stories you've got to tell us.
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, like I said, thank you for having me on. Obviously, a nice little easy episode you've got me into here with not many talking points. I'll be scratching around for things to say this week. Yeah, so I'm Matt from Sheffield. Big football fan. I support Sheffield United, and I like my cricket as well. A Yorkshire and an England fan. So yeah, in terms of sort of baseball, in 2015 or 16, I think it was, I was on holiday. We were doing a little bit of a drive around Tennessee to various places, which was a really nice trip. And on the last few evenings, we were in Nashville, looking at things to do, looking at sport, seeing what was on. So the Nashville Sounds were playing. Um, Thought, yeah, I like sport. I don't know much about baseball. I'll give it a go. I'll give it a try. Went to the game, no expectations. Thought it'd be just a good drink more than anything. And I ended up sat next to this really old guy who I got chatting to, who explained several rules for me, what was actually happening. And then since then, I've been sort of hooked on baseball. Really, I carried on coming home, watching baseball, getting a feel into it, signing up to MLB TV, and then it came to the point where I needed a team, and I have no US connections. I have nothing like that. No skin in the game, so I was kind of like, right, who do I go for here? And ahed, picked a few, never really stuck, and then I thought, right, I'm doing it lottery style, and I'm old school, writing every name I know, putting it into a hat, all 30 teams, and see how I draw out. And I drew out the Baltimore Orioles, and my first impression kind of was, what?
That's understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all saying that now.
I've been saying that ever since, really. And then from that, I mean, I was really glad I didn't get if I'd have got a Yankees, a Dodgers, a Red Sox, it probably would have gone back in because I can't be rooting for a big team.
Yeah.
It's not in my DNA. Hence Sheffield United. So I went with that, and sort of got into that and got to learn all things Baltimore, and then I eventually set up the British Orioles Twitter account, and that sort of grew from strength to strength, and that's built up a really nice community and following, both with fans over in Baltimore, and then obviously our end with the sort of WhatsApp groups we've got going off, and obviously setting up this podcast recently. Um, so that's been really cool, and part of that I've sort of been interviewed by various media outlets and MLB.com over the years, and stuff for the London series. And when I've had a few trips over the last few years to Baltimore, been to batting practice and met Rubenstein and Ben McDonald and Tony Taters and Brandon Hyde and quite a few others. So it's been a real roller coaster, and I'm really fortunate, despite the many pains it's brought. It's certainly outweighed itself with the sort of good news stories and whole sort of falling in love with a new club and a new city in America. It's been really fun.
Oh, it's fabulous. What is it quintessentially about baseball and perhaps the Orioles that does it for you?
Yeah, I think one thing is that sort of like underdog city and a city that has sort of been through a lot and um not in its heyday anymore and and sort of a lot of big neighbors around it and that sort of thing. I quite like that about Baltimore. And baseball, I think it's the sort of the bit of the old romantic in me. I really like the sort of traditions and the history and the even down to the sort of colours and the uniforms and the all the stories. The sort of America's pastime thing really appeals to me, and as modern sport gets more and more away from that, and baseball obviously has, but it's still nice to see so many traditions embedded into it. It's always fun.
Brilliant. Well, like you hinted at, we've got yourself to thank for this really, because we didn't know each other until you essentially started that community, and like you said, it's grown across Europe. So thank you, and it's
Yeah, nice
great
one.
to have you here on a completely uneventful week, as you hinted
Can I
at.
just get off now at this point? I've done my
Yeah,
introductions.
I
No, no, no.
think
Yeah.
we can all just
Invite me
stop.
back when we're on a 23 game winning streak.
If
Yeah.
if we've got to talk about this shit for an hour, so have you.
It's all your fault. So,
Yeah, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be doing this.
but before we do, let's have a little sort of review of the Nationals series. We welcome them to Oriole Park this week. The Battle of the Beltways. It's my understanding that a battle demonstrates fight from both sides. Andy, have you seen any of that?
Not particularly. We had a bit of the good, the bad, and the plain old Orioles ugly in game one. Bats were good in getting hits with Laureano, Holiday, and finally Adley getting 10 hits between them. But the situational hitting let us down again, with the total of 14 hits only allowing us to score 3 runs. Story of the season, pretty much. The ugly, though, was to find a new way to lose, with the usually unflappable Felix Bautista slow to get to the bag at first, and then allowing the runner to come home and throw the ball away. It went from bad to worse for the O's, and we're not going to even mention the bases loaded issues at all. Again, situational hitting just not happening again and again.
No. And watching Gibson's first inning in Saturday's game felt like another new low. We seem to be setting new standards. How did you see that, Matt?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
From behind the sofa.
Well, I was actually out last night and sort of turned the WhatsApp and the internet off. Thought I'll not have a look and watch it back and got home at about 10 and put it on, and I ended up very much speeding through that to sort of ease my own mental health really. But I mean, it's just the last thing anyone, even if we'd have lost, say, 15-0, but it'd have been spread out over the game, it'd have been easier to take then. New manager bound straight in, and then just carnage. Was it sort of 47 pitches, 6 earned runs, 6 hits, zero point 0.2 innings? It just never. It felt like it was never going to end. I thought he's never going to get he's never going to get an out. It was as ugly as it gets, really. And I think one of the things I sort of reflecting on was one of the biggest things I think a manager can do is pull a starting pitcher. I think it's obviously it's a huge move, and even when it's obvious, and for him to have to do that in the first inning at home, hours before he's been thrust into the job, was just he didn't need that. The team didn't need that. The fans didn't need that. Um, it was really disappointing to sort of put it diplomatically, I think.
Speaking of managers, so we're going to have to tackle this topic, but we've gone from AL Manager of the Season in 2023 to the current situation. For anyone living under a rock, Manager Hyde was relieved of his duties at the weekend. Was it 4 hours before the game, something like that, or it was announced anyway? We're going to talk about the apportionment of blame and I'm wondering if this is the beginning of the toppling of the current House of Cards. Thomas, what do you think?
Firstly, I feel for Brandon Hyde. This isn't totally on him. Um, but when you look at it, when a talented team and organisation like we are, you can see the depth and talent we have. A sitting 15 and 28. Someone had to take the fall. Sadly, it's landed with Brandon Hyde. Do I think he could have done any more? No. I also think that you could see that maybe he'd lost a bit of that fight or heart, and maybe that dripped down into the clubhouse because I think we were just at the point we are now, we're devoid of confidence. It's hard to say unless you're in that situation. It's unfair to speculate. I thought he probably would have looked at the hitting coaches before Hyde. I think you've got Cody Ash, Sherman Johnson, Tommy Joseph. Maybe they've got the old saying is too many cooks can spoil the broth in regard to the messes that are getting down to the bats. Obviously, that has been our fundamental. We've been on about the pitching. The pitching's not really an issue, apart if you take away the fact that a 70-year-old pitched 70 pitches in the first inning and got pulled. But Elias and Co have made the decision, and Hyde is gone now. Hopefully Hyde is a success wherever he goes, just not whenever we play them. And I think everyone would echo that sentiment towards Brandon Hyde.
Yeah. Grant, where do you think the problem has lay?
Yeah, I've said before on here, I didn't think that Hyde was a problem, but I also didn't think he was necessarily a solution to what we've seen this season. I think it should be remembered Brandon Hyde was brought in. This was his first big league managerial job for the 2019 season. Now I was listening to, people that knew a lot more about baseball than me in 2019 that had been watched it for a long time, and it wasn't really expected that Hyde would be the guy that would be on the top step when the Orioles finally got good, came out of the rebuild, and were going to kind of spend and invest and try and win things. So it is to his credit that he was that person that was there, and there was no reason to replace him. I mean, there was always people that didn't like him and thought we should have a bigger name. But he did a very good job. Oversaw one of the best seasons in recent years, 101 wins 2023 season. He turned. I think he was particularly good at keeping people motivated during the rebuild when there wasn't a lot to play for, and we still had good performances. Mancini, Mullins in particular turned his game around. There was more than that, and it must be a really difficult thing to have managed all that and know that you're going to lose, know that you don't have the tools to win close games most nights. But I think he did a good job through that and won a lot of games. People say he's over managing games, but he's won a lot of games pressing the buttons when we did have a bit more tools for him. So I'm personally sad for Hyde. I think he's been a good guy. He's been a good person for the Orioles. I think he has been scapegoated to a point here. I don't think this is on him at all. But I suppose the change was inevitable with the results, and sometimes you just need a catalyst to see if you can do it. Managers leave because they come to the end of the run, basically. So I do hope for Brandon Hyde that we do see him get another job and see him successful. Some.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I mean, Matt, you as a Sheffield United fan, you're used to quite a lot of managerial changes. How did you feel when you heard the news?
Yeah, I was surprised. I must admit. I didn't think they'd push the button this soon. Rightly or wrongly, sort of my own opinion out of it. I thought they're so process driven and so drilled into what they do, and everything is really thought out and strategy sort of above all else. So when it pinged up yesterday afternoon, I was surprised, I must admit. But in terms of my own personal opinion, sort of echoing what Grant said, I feel like this was definitely a way of mixing things up and shaking things up. I think it was the obvious first sort of button to push, really, in terms of how it can affect things and maybe give people a jolt. And and sort of I never thought Elias had sort of get pushed first or anything like that. I think his fingerprints are on the entire organisation at every single level. So if a move was to happen, I think this was the move that would have happened. And I know that sort of interview after Friday's game, he'd sort of looked more downbeat than ever, I think, Hyde, and just sort of said he was in disbelief and didn't really say much more than that. And I think he looked a broken man at that stage. So you'd imagine any sort of conversations after that, he might have almost been glad to have sort of been put out of his misery to a certain extent, I think. And one other thing I did find out, I know Tom then mentioned about the sort of hitting coaches and stuff like that. The news about Tim Cousins going, and I don't really know what to make of that, if I'm honest, why he was added to it and why he was added on that rather than anyone else feels like almost random. I'm guessing that there is obviously reasons why, but that hasn't been fully explained yet.
I think that might have been Hyde brought him in, didn't he? I think a month after Hyde came in,
Did he
or it
come
might
in
have
and
been later,
start with it?
2019. He brought him in, and I think he was kind of his like right hand man, basically
Yeah,
unofficial
yeah.
right hand man. And I think
They're
I
very
don't know
much
whether
come as a
I know
package
he's
sort of thing. Yeah,
yeah, whether and with him being the catching coach, I know obviously he probably might discuss hitting with Adley. I don't know whether anything to do
yeah,
with Adley's struggles. I get it's speculation, but all I know is that he was brought in. Brandon Hyde actually brought him in, so it's a bit like football. And if a manager comes in, he usually brings his backroom staff with him,
yeah,
and whoever comes in with him will go. Obviously, a bit different in baseball, but I think that's why he's gone.
yeah. That's a fair shout, I think.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've actually, Thomas, I believe you've got some breaking news live as we're recording here. So this is the first for us, isn't it?
So Kyle Gibson, I think we were all expecting it. He's being designated for assignment. I think Grant mentioned earlier on in the WhatsApp group that Tyler O'Neill, he's on the 10-day retroactive to the 16th of May for a left shoulder impingement, and they've recalled outfielder Dylan Carlson and recalled Cage Stroud. So that's the news today. That's just literally while we're in the middle of a record, it's just come up.
Okay, thank you. Right, so moving on a little bit, but staying on the Brandon Hyde theme, which is essentially what we're mainly going to talk about today. I'm interested to understand what our thoughts are on his legacy, really, because although the last 12 months have been pretty grim, relatively, it was largely an upward trajectory with Hyde. And do you think in the future, Andy, will sort of look fondly on his tenure when we look back, or and hopefully I'm not looking ahead too much, but we're going to look back as an opportunity lost. What are your feelings on his legacy?
So my take on it is that we all know that Brandon Hyde came into a team that was really at the lowest of low points, and we've mentioned it already. We lost 115 games under Uncle Buck back in 2018, and Hyde did no better in his first year. But this was always going to be a long road to recovery. No one was under any illusions that it was going to be a quick recovery. 2022 came along. Obviously, through the COVID years, it was very difficult to do anything. But 2022 was a bit of a turning point. We still had a very average overall roster, including everyday players like Roughneck Odor, Ryan McKenna. But we started to see the shoots of people like Felix Bautista. Adley and Gunnar were the start of the baby birds coming through. The future looked a lot brighter. And suddenly we were over 500 for the first time for many years. But I don't think anyone can begrudge Hyde the success that was there in the 2023 season. And to be honest, I think it came a bit too quick, as we still didn't have the whole ticket in place. And in fact, we probably still don't. Sure, we had some great players growing up with the O's, but we didn't have the rotation we needed. And the average of our rotation that year was still an ERA of about 4.5. We could always rely on scoring one more run than the opposition, and that was the way we played. Often against the odds. I mean, how many times do we remember the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th innings coming back from 1, 2, 3 runs behind to unexpectedly win a game? But you can't do that when you get to the playoffs, and that's where pitching is one of the key aspects. You'll be playing the best of the best. They will always find your weak spot, and boy, they have. It's certainly clear to see. 2024, we started off really well, but we've had very well documented the fall off from the All-Star break. The pitching was not up to it, and despite finding a gem in Albert Suarez, overall starting ERA still north of 4. So in general, Hyde made the best of what he had, but was hamstrung by not being able to get the rotation in a good place. Over-reliance on the bats gives you false positivity, but you get found out, and the other teams scout you so well that they will stop your bats eventually. And I think that's one of the big reasons that that's happened, and that's what's happened since July last year, where our bats have calmed down. So I'm not blaming Hyde. He gave us a good couple of seasons, woke up the fan base, definitely, but the lack of pitching depth, which the front office has got to be blamed for, and some, let's face it, really bad luck. We haven't really had a season where we haven't had 2, 3 or 4 of our first line pitchers out on the DL. So I suppose a bit of fondness and disappointment all in one.
Okay, thank you. Thomas, how would you sort of crystallise the good and the bad from his legacy?
Again, I mean, as Andy said, look, Hyde came in 2018, a month after Elias came in, and obviously the pair of them are tasked with a massive rebuild. As Andy said, the first few years weren't great, but that's to be expected when you're going through a rebuild. And then, obviously, as fans, we finally got a sense that something great could possibly be on the horizon. After 2022, we went 83 and 79, and then things did get better. Hyde led us to an AL East best of 101 wins and an AL East pennant and a playoff berth. 24 was another successful season, 91 wins and a wildcard berth. Again, I think he should be remembered fondly for bringing back winning baseball, albeit obviously not this season, to Camden Yards. I think he should be thanked for the work he put in during this rebuild project, nurturing some of the talent that Andy mentioned. We get to see on a daily basis. Holiday, Gunner, Adley. I think the biggest disappointment from the Hyde regime will be the 0-5 playoff record. After performance so well in the season, getting swept in 2 playoff series back to back, that is a major disappointment. Look, he leaves ranked 4th on the O's win list behind Earl Weaver, Buck Showalter and Paul Richards.
Okay, thanks for that. And Grant, have you got a different opinion on the matter?
Yeah, in terms of looking back, I think I worry now, especially in the last 24 hours, that we will look back on the Brandon Hyde period as a good spell, and we may not get back to that level again in the near future. My view has shifted over the past week and certainly over the past day, that a bigger problem they always have is the front office and the Mike Elias project, as we called it. I've been very vocal that I think Elias has been excellent at some key aspects that has helped us and driven this organisation, is a big reason for the success in terms of his focus on the draft and development, his skill level there, the value acquisitions that were picked up out of nowhere that have turned into being very decent contributors. But I think he is also kind of too rigid in his views in some of those, and there's not a lot of flexibility. There's not a lot of things that happen on the fly to try and improve, what we've got. He's made very, very few good free agent signings, even whether they're cheap ones or relative or pretty expensive ones by Orioles standards, and I think that is the biggest single contributor to where the O's find themselves this year. Now, you could not legislate for the likes of Charlie Morton and Tyler Neal being as bad as they have been so far, But even if they were at the kind of mid-range of their projections, they weren't guys that were going to put us over the top as a playoff team to win playoff series. There just was not enough picked up there, in my view. They were very potentially good 162 game acquisitions, but for those to be the main signings, Sagano's been excellent, obviously. You got to give him credit for that. But elsewhere, there's not been enough, high ceiling guys coming in when we have started spending money these last few seasons. I also worry, to move on from Hyde to Elias, also worry that Elias has this leadership structure where he is actually in charge and he's quite happy to hire kind of younger or inexperienced people for key roles, that he either makes sure buy into his philosophy or that just don't give him a lot of pushback. Obviously, I don't know this for sure. It's just a hunch. Two examples over the winter. Something that we've not spoken about and almost nobody's spoken about was Freddie Gonzalez being replaced as the bench coach and Robinson Chirinos coming in. First ever kind of job outside of playing for Robinson Chirinos. And obviously, we've spoken about this before. Again, we don't know the ins and outs and nuts and bolts of the hitting coach, but Cody Ash becoming the primary hitting coach at the age of 34. Now, he may well be a talented guy. He may know everything he's talking about, but he's still only 34. He's only a few years older than most of the players he's speaking to. We are a big organisation. We've increased the payroll. Why are we not getting experienced people that have been there and done it at the top level before? And of course, to kind of back up that point, Hyde's first hire with the Orioles was Elias's first hire was Brandon Hyde. Again, that was his first managerial job. Obviously there wasn't going to be a lot of options for the Orioles at that time. You weren't going to go and get a guy that won 3 World Series to come into a rebuild. But it just another kind of tick in the box of Elias is doing it his own way, and I worry that there's not a plan B there, and there's no other intellectual input required or desired from MD else. It's his way, and it's worked to a point, but now it's not working. It looks pretty bad.
Okay, thank you. I do hope that whoever we do hire long term isn't quite as obsessed with lefty-righty matchups and can be maybe a little bit more dynamic when it comes to
I think that is very unlikely, Simon. I think that is going to be one of the things that the new person does.
Yeah. Okay, so looking forward, what's next for the Orioles? Will we see new manager bounce? Ironic question, maybe, after what's just happened. But sort of more broadly, what will constitute a successful season and beyond? What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, just sort of touching back a bit on what Grant said then. I saw an interview this morning with Ken Rosenthal and echoing what Grant said. He reeled off, I think it was, obviously Manslino will be in his first year as a sort of interim manager. The bench coach is in his first year, the hitting coach in his first year, the pitching coach is in his second year. And there's just, when you've lost someone like Gonzalez and Hyde and stuff like that, it's such an inexperienced group to go with, such an sort of, especially in terms of the sort of position players, that's so inexperienced as well. So it does concern me. I feel like we're at a bit of a crossroads in terms of that. And then to sort of answer your second question in terms of where we're at. I mean, I think Kyle Gibson has ended the world's shortest honeymoon period ever of 47 pitches or whatever it was. That sort of completely fizzled that out. So we're sort of still in this rut. I think it would be good to try and get to 500. I think it would be good to sort of hover around there and to finish strong. Maybe not finishing last place in the AL East, stuff like that. But the big one for me is that the pitching issue can be resolved in a more sort of straightforward line of approach in terms of one, getting guys back healthy, Bradish, Wells, Grayson, etc. And and actually spending some money on some sort of good trades in the winter. But the number one thing for me from now until October time really is getting that young core hitting again. Um, Adley, Gunner, Westy, Cowser, Jackson, Kerstad, all of those have shown they can do it. It's not a flash in the pan. We had the best record over sort of 2 years in the American League. They've shown they are capable, but it's now gone on for 7, 8, 9 months where they're really underperforming. So the biggest thing I want to see from now until then to make this period useful is getting those playing well, getting those looking well, getting those taking sort of good at bats. That's what I'd like to see more than anything. And to a certain extent, you could even argue that the sort of offense getting itself together is more important than results. Once we sort of drift it towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I'll just jump in again. I was surprised when I saw that Mansolino had been told he was given the job for the rest of the season. That was something that surprised me. I expected we talked about this before, that we thought Hyde was probably going to go at some point, and if it was mid-season or at the end of the season, I still expected them to do a full recruitment and get somebody in, whether that was in June or July or October, November. So the fact that we're not doing that, we're just putting an interim in, and we're basically figuring it out for the whole, which is still over 100 games. It's not like we're coming into the end of the season. That does concern me. And what I wonder is if Rubinstein is kind of taking some of those reins from Elias and saying, you're not going to hire a new manager at this stage. We're going to make the decisions at the end, and that is possibly Rubinstein is going to make a decision on Elias at that point as well. And anything that he does between now and then is not going to have a long term impact. So again, that's just my hunch. But I did expect us to just hire, go through a process, for 30, 40 days and interview managers and get somebody in that was going to be the guy. The fact they're not doing that, I think, suggests that they're kicking it into the winter's grass.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I suppose us Brits are used to the football analogy, where someone comes in and almost the next day there is someone already lined up to go into service as the new manager. We're not used to this extended period, and I was with you. I'm very surprised, because the first we really knew about that was the interview that he did last night after the game, where he confirmed that he was going to be we call it caretaker, but interim manager for the rest of the season. But we're just used to immediate hires and rehires, and off we go. So it's a bit of a British viewpoint potentially, that we thought, you know what, he's going to be gone and someone else will be there, but that certainly isn't going to happen.
And to play devil's advocate, it probably is the case, whether it's Elias doing the hiring or not. If you wait to the winter, you get more time to think about things. You're kind of not just taking who's available. There might be people moving about, leaving roles. You've got more options, but again, I still think there's enough people out there that they could get the right guy, or get somebody suitable that would be the long term, or what they would see as a long term fit.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think touching on the points you made about that sort of inexperience and the coaching as well. You see the fear in some of the hitters' faces, I think, don't you? And even the pitchers as well. And I'm going to butcher Babe Ruth's famous quote, but it was something like, "Never let the fear of striking out stop you from playing the game." I'm sure someone will correct me on that, but you not only can you see it, I think you can feel it, can't you? So Thomas, what are have you got any sort of hope on the horizon in terms of the way we approach whatever's next?
So obviously, as we know, obviously Tony Mansolino is interim until the end of the season. We'll probably, before now and then, have a deeper discussion into potential candidates, and we'll have that discussion on the pod. Again, I don't want to keep bringing him up because he's gone now, but there is no doubt that we are in a better place than we were years ago because of the work that Hyde did. We've got a lot of the talent is under team control for the next few years, and if we can salvage something, then it could and should only be a mini rebuild. We do stand to lose a few players at the deadline, but obviously with Gunner, Jackson, Adley, and Mountcastle all under control through next year and beyond for most of them. There is still hope that our window hasn't closed. It's just someone's just come and shut it over slightly. On the subject of the next appointments, obviously we now know it is going to be October. And it's interesting because we've had this conversation in the WhatsApp group before about is Elias going to be gone in October. I've had a wager with one of the lads in the group for the charity of choice that I did think he was going to be around, but then when I realised and watched the press conference from last night where Mansolino said he's been put in charge to the end of October, I think that is kind of, it's whether Rubenstein wants Elias around, and with that appointment he's made until the end of October, I don't think, I mean, others do, I think he might be, but saying that, obviously the decision will be made in October, regardless of it is. I think Elias is now potentially in the gallows. I think he's got the noose around his neck, and is Rubenstein gonna let the trapdoor go and kick Elias to the side? If Elias does go, do we get a general manager in that will want to spend some bees and honey? That's Benjamin's for our American cousins. Or do we go with another GM who's tighter than a pair of bullfighters' trousers and endorses the philosophy of touring the local geriatric institutes, searching for the next guy in the rotation? Surely we can't have another GM that, if it comes down to it, thinks that signing Gibson, Morton, Kimbrell, Sanchez and O'Neill, letting Tony take his go, Danny Kalu walk, pick up Soto's option and delayed Bradish's Tommy John surgery, so we killed her for 2 seasons, and what we now seem to realise was a fake offer to Corbin Burns. Surely we can't have that. Rubenstein and the front office have a massive off-season ahead of them, the biggest we've had in a long time. The first big decision has been made now, but there are more decisions lurking on the horizon for Rubenstein and co.
So I'm going to take that as an official resignation from the Mike Elias fan club chairman position that you've got, Thomas, and that's live on the podcast there for everyone.
Never chaired such a thing. There's rumours going around that I chair the Jorge Mateo fan club as well. Don't do that. Ryan Mountcastle fan club, don't chair that one. Adley Bushman, don't chair that one.
Is there anyone left?
Ramon Urias,
Okay,
I'll happily chair that one.
So we need to look forward in the short term as well. So we do have a series coming up where there's a chance that we could actually win a couple of games, but I feel like we've said that before. So let's have a little preview of the Brewers series. Andy, how do you see it?
So,
or are you trying not to think about it?
Oh, indeed. It got to the point that I don't think any of us knew who we were playing next until we actually went and had a look. But hoping that we're going to see some happy days and maybe see some thumbs up from the Fonz to go back many, many years, probably before Thomas was born. We'll be looking forward to playing another struggling team, although they're not as bad as we are at the moment. A 3-game series, 12:40 a.m. UK time, so that wonderful time of the morning that none of us want to be awake. With the Wednesday game, at least a matinee. So if we've done well, we will have a UK friendly 6:10 first pitch. If we haven't done well, we'll all be down the pub. Nothing yet from the O's on pitching. Not a real surprise at the moment, but we expect Dean Kramer, Sagano, Povich to be the mound, facing righty Quinn Priester, who's 1-2, 4.59 ERA, so not spectacular. And then 2 rookies, Logan Henderson, 23-year-old, 2-0, 2.45 ERA, a 4th round pick in 2021. So it proves you can find people that aren't first round picks, and that's something we've been really, really bad at, is picking decent pitching or any pitching. And his fellow rookie Chad Patrick, also a 4th round pick the same year, not so good, 2 and 4, but a better ERA. If we had some of our starters with a 3.35 ERA, would be absolutely over the moon. Again, 3 righties, which is probably a bit of a relief, but at the moment, I don't think it matters if it's a righty or lefty. We just need to find a bit of a break and win that series to try and come away with some positivity, which we certainly haven't got at the moment.
Grant, excuse me, Grant, you've been having a look at this as well.
Yeah, it looks like over the weekend the Brewers have been the latest victims of the Twins buzzsaw that we've caught in the last few weeks. They lost to the Twins 3-0 on Friday, 7-0 on Saturday, where we are recording before Sunday's games. So much like going into the Nats series, we are facing a team on paper that are also on a bit of a slide. The Brewers, with regards to hitting, are 28th in MLB in OPS. Only Rockies and the White Sox are worse than them. Team figure of 652. The pitching is not much better, still below league average, but it's certainly better than ours. And on paper, looking at the hitting, they are really struggling. They've only got 2 batters that you would class as league average or better in any kind of the main categories and that played regularly. So that is the 2 guys to watch out for is left-handed batter Bryce Turang. Tends to play leadoff, has a 296 average and a very, very nice on-base percentage of 374. And the first baseman, Rhys Hoskins, OPS this season of 834. So not monster, but certainly above average. But as we've seen this season, we tend to turn 8 and 9 hitters of the opposition into professional clean-up men. So
very true.
Likely other candidates for game-winning hits if the Brewers get anything going.
Thank you for that. Before we close out for today, just want to thank everyone who's, since our last episodes, we picked up more followers on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, YouTube. If you've got any questions for us or any suggestions, you can also email us at europeanorioles@gmail.com. We'd welcome any feedback or questions and we'd give you a shout out on the pod as well. And we'd like to thank Matt for joining us today. And before we sign off, we always like to think and share at least one positive. So, Thomas, would you like to kick us off?
It's predictable, isn't it, really? That was his biggest fanboy. Jackson Holiday. Just look at the kid go now. He's playing every day. It's like we have been crying out for it for, I mean, since the start of this season, we've been crying out to get this kid playing every day. That, huge positive. Although I'm not his biggest fan at the moment, Adley, he's coming off a decent series with the bat, but I just hopefully now there's a kind of attitude change and maybe there's a bit more. Mancelio's coming in with a bit more fight. He hasn't been through, because he's been there with Hyde, but he hasn't probably had to deal with the issues head on like Hyde. So hopefully there's a bit more confidence. And I think last night there was a lot of emotion in it for the game. If you go and have a look at the players' interviews before the games, Sedi was pretty much close to tears, thinking that he'd let him down. Urias obviously was devastated. So maybe once this series is out the way and then they get on the road away from Baltimore, maybe they can kind of try and forget about it and move on now and look to the future, because that's what they need to do. You can't change what's gone in the past. It's been done. Forget about it. Let's try and look forward now. As Mancelio said, he wants to try and get to 500, and if he believes that we can get to 500, that we may be able to make a late push. I believe him on getting to 500. The late push, Tony, if you're listening, whatever you're smoking, send it my way, because that's some sincere optimism.
Okay. And Matt, I hope you've enjoyed joining us. What are you going to leave us with in terms of positivity?
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you for having me on. And I think Tom briefly touched on it there. I think the sort of the players' interviews pre-game yesterday were sort of really interesting to look through and see them. Certainly the emotion they were showing, and it did show that they cared. But I think what I took from it more than anything was the majority of interviews I saw were saying Brandon Hyde is a good guy and he lost his job because of our performances. And for them, especially as such a young group, to not deflect and not sort of give excuses or hide under or not mention it. I think for them to own up and say this is ultimately our performances that have resulted in this action is a really sort of mature and sensible and sort of it's a big thing to say and because of the emotion they didn't seem like sort of empty sort of token gestures. So hopefully it'll be the for the most of these guys who sort of said this was the first time they've gone through this and sort of had this and they'd only known Brandon as their manager in the major leagues. This is a huge learning curve for them and a huge chance for them to reflect and hopefully as this weekend moves away and we move out into Milwaukee, it might start to think for them what's next and think about their approach and performance and results as well. So hopefully something positive does come from this.
Yeah, thank you. Grant, what have you got for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think a positive is Adley back, and that's going to be really, really important if we are going to get anywhere near 500, even just playing 500 baseball for the rest of the season. Our success and failure has been inexplicably linked with Adley being on the roster and tend to play well. In terms of a new manager bounce, I think it's almost impossible to decide that. We've only seen the one game, obviously, which did not go well because we were 6-0 down before we came to that. So we'll find that out over this week if there is a bounce. Let's hope there is, because it's going to be pretty dreadful if we keep watching team getting beat 2-1 every series or 3-0.
Yep. Andy?
So I'm going to go with Charlie Morton, the venerable Charlie Morton. Indeed, I have to be controversial sometimes, but last 3 games,
Brave man.
last 3 games out of the bullpen, 9 innings pitched, 4 hits, 2 earned runs. He looked as good as we've seen him. Now that's not a positive solution necessarily, because he's been pretty awful, or very awful. But he could be a contender to start again, especially with the news we've just had that Cole Gibson's been DFA'd, so he may have to move back into the rotation. We shall see. I think one of the keys for Charlie was yesterday almost pleading with the manager to stay on into, I think it was probably the 7th inning, where he'd already pitched 60 pitches after only pitching 40 only 2 days ago. So I think, and his interview that we mentioned in our pod last week, he was very honest and very upset with his own performance. So let's see if we can get a positive out of Charlie this week.
I like it. Well, mine is that we've given him a little bit of stick previously, and I am very critical of Mountcastle at the plate, swinging at all sorts, but he is showing a bit of form and a bit of consistency, so long may that continue. I think we do rely on him. Like I've said before, we moved the bloody wall for him, so at least he can do is hit the ball a few more times.
Absolutely.
So, fingers crossed that will continue, because if we just get 2 or 3 of them going, we might be able to start enjoying some games again. So, well, thank you for all those. Thanks again, Matt, for joining us. We'll have a slightly more normal episode that won't be focusing, hopefully, on things like managers leaving and big deals like that. Hopefully, we'll be able to talk about some wins. Some of the team will be back in midweek with a shakedown, and we've been O's across the pond. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks all.
Cheers.
Thank you,
Goodbye.
guys.